evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. On behalf of the NGMA Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, the Consulate General of Canada in Mumbai, and Avid Learning, we present Multipolis Mumbai, Philanthropy and the City. A panel discussion that examines the impact and the future trajectory of philanthropy in our city and the role of global initiatives and platforms in instrumenting change on a local level. This is a very special event, especially curated for the International Day of the Girl Child. This very venue, the NGMA Mumbai, as well as the SR House, the Royal Opera House, and several other landmarks in the city will light up pink. So please do check it out after this talk. Our Multipolis Mumbai series, which started in 2012, was revived last year and aims to decode the past while looking to the future and finding novel ways of engaging with, interacting, and re-energizing the city we love. Under this umbrella, we continue to take a closer look at businesses, brands, architects, technology as related to arts engagement, poetry, women writers, and wildlife, video games. And today, we turn our attention to philanthropic individuals and institutions and how they have influenced the way our city has been shaped. I would like to especially thank the Director General, Nehru Science Centre, Mumbai, and the NGMA Mumbai, Mr. Shiv Prasad Kenneth, and his team for giving us this opportunity. I'm going to invite him up to say a few words, especially about the seminal Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign and how it's affecting change on the ground. Mr. Kenneth.
Thank you, Asad. Once again, on behalf of the National Gallery of Modern Art, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, I'd like to extend a warm welcome for this wonderful event today. Today happens to be the International Day of the Girl Child, and Asad also asked me to speak a few words about the government program, which is known as the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program. This year is very special. Normally, what happens is when the Nobel Prizes are announced, you hardly find lady scientists. I'm not talking about the peace and literature. We do have some, but especially in science, you hardly have. This year has been special. In the chemistry, for example, you have a lady who has shared half the Nobel Prize. The other half has been shared by two gentlemen. And in physics, again, there's one lady who has shared 1/4 of the Nobel Prize. So this is very special. I think it needs to be rejoiced. Well, I mean, not only for that, another reason why I would like to say about especially the chemistry Nobel laureate, Dr. Raell, she is a cancer survivor, a single mother to 3 sons, and yet her passion for research has been profound. Incidentally, the approach that she adopted in winning the Nobel Prize is something which is completely different. She used a method known as directed evolution. Imagine directing in the process of evolution itself. So she used this completely new concept to expedite the process of evolution, trying to mimic the evolution to introduce some enzymes, proteins, which will be beneficial for humankind. As an outcome of that, the other 2 scientists harvested her knowledge to come out with some therapeutics and medicines which are very helpful for arthritis and things like that. When she started this experiment, people called her lunatic. I mean, it's humbug science and things like that, because it was never heard of, making enzymes using a process which is known as directing the evolution. But then that was sometime back in 1993, 25 years now, she has earned the Nobel Prize. Same is the case with the other lady who actually, when you go for eye surgery, they use laser to actually correct your cornea, the focal length and things like that. We must remember those scientists who actually worked to produce those lasers which are very, very focused, have high intensity, and one of them is this lady, Dr. Donna. She used a new method known as chirped pulse amplification, for which, of course, she got the Nobel Prize. In recognition of this, and also the fact that when the 10th and 12th results are announced, you see across the board, the front page is that the girls outshine boys. Every year, there has never been an aberration until now. it's always the girls who outshine the boys. But then what happens later is something a mystery. So maybe in recognition of that, and also the sex ratio, which is actually very skewed, the government of India initiated a program, a laudable program in 2015 called the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao program. It is not just sloganeering. In fact, 100 districts were selected to target this program, and the results have been outstanding. In addition to that, financially to empower them, they have introduced another program, another scheme known as Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, where girl students from the age of up to the age of 10, the parents can actually deposit money up to 1,50,000 per year, and they will get the highest interest rate, which is higher than even the Provident Fund. This is the kind of a program that the government of India has introduced just to encourage this. To ensure that the girls, the ladies actually join us in the nation building. We are 1.25 billion people, and then almost 50% of them, although we have a sex ratio of about 914 to 1,000, which I'm sure because of this Beti Bachao Beti Padhao program, it's going to increase. So with these few words, I'm sure the philanthropists will actually speak more on how do we actually empower girls, how do we attract them into the creative areas like arts and sciences, which I'm sure is going to be beneficial to the girl students. Once again, on behalf of the NGMA, I would like to welcome you all for this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenneth. Avid has had a long and fruitful collaboration and a wonderful relationship with the Consulate General of Canada in Mumbai, with structured programming and multi-level events, thereby enhancing our mutual reach. We've collaborated on events like Mami, TIFF, Kalagurat Festival, to name a few. We recently collaborated on a discussion around the photographs of the Beatles' time in India. And I think this is our 4th year collaborating with International Day of the Girl Child. So I'm very happy to please welcome Acting Consul General and Senior Trade Commissioner, Consulate General of Canada in Mumbai, Tara Showwaters, to say a few words on the significance of International Day of the Girl Child and Canada's involvement, including Consul of the Day. Tara.
Thank you, Asad. First of all, I do want to thank all of the partners that are here tonight. The Government of Canada kind of squeaks in on the side, and really it's the hard work of everybody around us. So first of all, thank you very much to the Director of the NGMA for hosting this event. Mr. Kanad, we're very happy, and of course Asad Lalji and the entire Avid team for their hard work curating and organizing the panel discussion. And we have speakers tonight that will be very interesting, and I have to apologize because I'm not going to be able to stay for all of it because I'm quite keen to hear. We in government can only amplify the good work that the grassroots organizations do, and Shaheen Mistri, the CEO for Teach India and the founder of Akanksha, our token Canadian, Neera Nundy, the founding partner of Dasra, Raell Padamsee, sorry, I said your name wrong, who's an eminent theater personality and a part of the Create Foundation, and Bahram Vakil, the founder and senior partner of AZB and Partners. We are indebted to you for sharing your knowledge with us, and grateful for the example that all NGOs show us, particularly in the work with women and girls. As you know, the Government of Canada has a feminist international development assistance agenda. And one of the reasons we've have that is we really feel that as decision makers and agents of change, women and girls can drive stronger economic growth, they can encourage greater peace and improve the quality of life for families and their communities, and it's been proven that governments, countries thrive in their GDP when women are more involved in the economic development of the country. Canada has been involved, along with like-minded countries, in promoting International Day of the Girl Child from the very inception. About a decade ago, we were at the United Nations trying to convince people that a special day had to be set aside for girls because International Day of the Child, for some reason, was sort of co-opted by boys. As a result, since its inception in 2012, we've taken pains to make sure that we celebrated it with pride and with the partners that were really doing something good on the ground, and we have examples of that here today. I think that a good example of the lighting up, you'll see today when on your way home, many of Mumbai's iconic buildings lit up in pink, and I think that despite the fact that we're supposed to be wearing yellow for Navratri, I'm proud to wear pink today for International Day of the Girl Child. Assad introduced me and said that I was acting consul general, but in fact I was this morning when I arrived at work. But shortly after I arrived, I banished that title and was able to pass on the opportunity to be consul general for a day to JK College, and is working very hard with the Society for Nutrition, Education and Health Action in Mumbai as part of a program that Canada funded originally with the UNFPA, and has been doing amazing work, which we just came from seeing some of the work that the girls in her program and some of the brothers that have been co-opted along to do street theater songs and street theater related to really pushing the boundaries on assumptions about what to wear, assumptions about how we should act, assumptions about where girls should go, and assumptions about the potential for girls in this community that they live in and in India as a whole. We all know that India has a vast potential and the women are part of that vast potential. And I think that women and girls around the world have to have equal access to education and to learning opportunities in order to make that happen. Here in India and around the world, the International Day of the Girl Child's theme is every girl in school. We hope that you will all remember that and take the opportunity to encourage the young girls around you. Though they are enrolling in education in India at a higher rates than boys at the beginning, their dropout rate is significantly higher and many of them are not continuing. So I'd like to invite Shimpi just quickly to come up. Consul General, my boss for the day.
First of all, thank you and a great honor for giving me as a Canada consulate today an opportunity. I'm really thankful for you. It's a great experience for me for today and lots of knowledge I get. As I joined, जब मैंने स्नेहा ज्वाइन किया सपोर्टेड बाय यूएनएफपीए, तो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है. अभी मुझे ऐसा लगता है जो भी नॉलेज मुझे मिल रहा है वो मैं मेरे तक ना रखूँ, सबको मैं शेयर करूँ एज पॉसिबल एज. और इवन अगर जो डिसीजन हम आज ले रहे हैं, आई एम डैम श्योर कि वो फ्यूचर में आपको यूज़ आने वाला ही है. सो वी नो हम खुद को ज़्यादा अच्छा पहचानते हैं, उतना हमें कोई नहीं पहचानता जितना हम खुद को पहचानते हैं. तो हम खुद में देखें कि हमने क्या है डिसीजन और वो हमें फ्यूचर में डिसाइड करेगा हाँ मैंने ये राइट डिसीजन लिया था. थैंक यू.
So you'll see it's going to be kind of hard for me to take back the mantle because she's doing such a good job today. But we're grateful for that, grateful again for this panel discussion. We look forward to hearing everyone's views on philanthropy and how we can make it better in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Shimpi. Very encouraging to hear those words. Now to the task at hand, Multipolis Mumbai, philanthropy and the city. Mumbai has actually been built thanks to philanthropy, and according to research, Mumbai is the home to the highest number of Indian philanthropists. What does philanthropy achieve in our maximum city today? Our panel of experts are here to tell us. We have CEO, Teach for India, and founder Akanksha, Shaheen Mistri. Founding partner, Dasra, Neera, Nundy. Eminent theatre personality and founder, Create Foundation, Raell Padamsee. And they will be in conversation with founder and senior partner, AZB and partners, Bahram Vakil. Bahram's bio that you have is his legal profession bio, but he's really involved with several philanthropic organizations and institutions in Bombay. So he'll be a great person to be having this conversation with. You do have their detailed bios. Just quickly before we begin, a quick reminder, put your phones on silent and start using them. Get social, start posting, reposting, tagging. Our handle is @Avid Learning and hashtag is Learning Never Stops. Thank you very much. Have a great discussion, and over to you, Bahram.
Thanks a lot, Asad. Thank you, Avid. Thank you, NGMA, and thank you, Canada. So I think, you know, as would be obvious to most of you, I'm here. I learned a new word today. I'm here because otherwise it would have been a flannel, so I'm the token male. Certainly not the expert. And they had a mix-up also between husband and wife. I think my wife was the right person for this. But having said that, you know, it's a real privilege. And again, keeping with your motto that continuous learning, certainly for me, this is going to be evening where I learn a lot. So just to take off, also I've been told very clearly that we have to keep Bombay in mind. So let's start off with that. We know that we have an extremely rich history of philanthropy in Bombay going back a century. And keeping that in mind, you know, from the architecture, from the public projects, from JJ School, and all the beautiful structures we see around us, how are we doing today? I would like to ask each and every one of you that are we keeping with that heritage? Are things falling into place? Or is that really not a core area of philanthropy for Bombay? Shaheen, why don't you?
So thinking a little bit about how you would answer that for girls. I think in this city it depends on which girl you're talking to. Yesterday I had the privilege of spending my whole day in schools. And at one point I was in a government school that adjoins the Atria Mall. Right behind the Atria Mall there's a government school. And I was in a 5th standard classroom, and I'm always drawn to kids whose hair is a little messy and who look a little bit naughty. And so I was sitting next to this little girl, and she looked at me and she said, Didi, have you heard of Teach for India? And I said, yeah. And she said, do you know why? Because I am part of Teach for India. And I looked at the sort of excitement and the spark that an education has given her. 2 schools before that, I was in a government school on Worli Seaface, and I walked into a 10th standard classroom, and kids were alone without a teacher, Teach for India kids. And the first girl that I went up to, 10th standard girl, I said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm solving partiality in the school. And I said, what do you mean partiality? She said, you know, teachers are partial and students are partial as well, and this is the problem I'm going to solve. And she was using a design thinking framework to solve that, and the girl next to her was saying, what I'm solving is mental health issues. And I said, what percentage of kids have mental health issues? She said, about 50% of my class, I anticipate, have mental health issues, but we're going to solve it as girls in this school. And so I think about that and the power of what philanthropy and what the power of what education can do. But then I know that for every one classroom where I experience that, there are 100 in this city where I experience nothing like that. And so just wanted to start by saying I think that's the motivation for the need to give.
Yes, so to come to the girl child, I think because we work in the creative arts a lot, we find that we've been working, like Shaheen, with a lot of children from marginalized communities, and they, I find, are extremely, extremely talented. So whether we're talking about them in the drama space, or we're talking about them in singing or dance or whatever it is, we try and see that we can give them the maximum so that they are also able to go back into their schools. They have become teachers of what we've been teaching them. And I think it's terribly important. Of course, there's a huge need. And because we come from CREATE, which is working a lot with the creative arts in schools, especially marginalized schools and schools with children with different abilities, I think where we are today, we've reached quite a bit, but we do have a long, long way to go.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if there's a reason that I'm on the left side of him and the other two are the other side. And I was thinking to myself, maybe it's because I'm Canadian, token Canadian. But and so I wanted to just mention that, hence the accent. And then I was in discussions with Asad when he was like, you should come and speak here. And I'm like, really? I don't know how much I can contribute to think about philanthropy in the city. And then I took a step back and thought, I've now lived in Toronto, in New York City, and now in Mumbai for almost 20 years, and started an organization called Dasra, which in Sanskrit means enlightened giving. And if I just think about our organization and what we've seen in these last 20 years from the perspective of Mumbai, the city, but also philanthropy, to your question, I think it has changed, and it has changed phenomenally and for the better. I think we are a wonderful, complicated, and very dense city. And so how we look at philanthropy and how we look at issues of education and inclusivity are really magnified in terms of its complexity and how we can actually solve some of these problems. I think some of the things we've seen over this years is the amount of wealth creation. So where Asad had spoken about, we have some of the highest proportion of billionaires in this city. And that's coming from certain kinds of industries, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's conglomerates, whether it's natural resources. And if you see how some of these foundations are beginning to think about their giving, we have seen a move from, the very old traditional way of infrastructure, giving to infrastructure, being patrons, to now individuals as well as companies as well as foundations being a lot more strategic about their giving and starting to think about impact and think about those frameworks. Now, that being said, I think there's a lot to be done in terms of CSR. I think that has been a great trigger, and I'm sure you'll ask some more follow-up questions. But I think what we have seen as quite powerful is the individual giver, whether one that can give significantly more, and these are families, whether they're older established families or newer wealth, we see these folks as taking a lot more risk and being able to actually support much more innovation. So we started these things called giving circles where individuals, typically professionals, could contribute, and we actually supported Sneha. It was one of our first giving circles where we supported a program in Dharavi to actually help with nutrition. And if you see the progress of Sneha, we're doing community work to how they do research and actually look at impact. Our giving circle was helping them be accountable and improving nutrition by 25%. So we're seeing quite a change from how you look at giving, how one engages in it, whether with their time, and how one really starts to look at impact.
Thanks a lot. So I think, you can see this is going to be very free-flowing, and I think we've all learned well from our politicians that you just say what you want to, forget about the question. So I'll try one more time. Shaheen brought me back to the key point of the day, which is the girl child, and certainly we have to discuss that issue more. And I have one question for each of you, so we keep it free flowing. One is to you, Shaheen. I'm very privileged to be associated with a bunch of schools in UP, Bihar, etc. And there, a point that was already touched upon, I think, by one of the speakers, that fortunately the girl child is in primary school much, much more. But then if you look at the percentages that flow over to secondary, it drops substantially. So the things we can do to improve that percentage and to keep them in school, and I know it's a combination of social factors for sure, as well as mindset change. So, that's the one I had for you. For Raell, again, as you say, there is a lot more that I think we can do in the arts and crafts. People like your organization and Shamak do a lot with kids, but I think there's much, much more that we can do. And I think, again, as you mentioned, there is definitely a change, but we should discuss that more. Let's say if we look over the last 5-year period, given that you have a strong look into corporate India, especially given the CSR law that has come in and now is clearly mandatory, do you see, besides the legal and mandatory part, do you feel that from a human point of view, the question of giving has dramatically changed, slowly changed? So a whole bunch of questions for all of you.
So I think your question was a little bit about why do kids, girls especially, drop out of school. As you mentioned, UP, I was remembering a few years ago, I was visiting schools in rural UP. And interestingly, I walked into one school and I had a thought that disturbed me a lot. And the thought was not like, why aren't kids in school, but why are kids in school? Because the school was so awful that I just felt we were taking what is naturally what a child has, curiosity and creativity and the ability to take risks. And we're systematically in so many of our schools sort of killing that. I was in a school yesterday, Dharavi Transit Camp, and I walked into that school and the stench of the bathrooms was so overwhelming that again I had that thought, like, why are we sending our kids and our girls to schools like this? I think the question becomes, how do you change this at a systemic level so that every girl is in a school that she feels proud of? In the same city of Mumbai yesterday, I went to 2 government schools and I didn't understand how unlucky kids in one school were compared to kids in another school, and this is run by the same government. But I think our learning over the years has been that the only thing that's going to solve this is talent, and we all sort of know this in our individual spheres of work, that wherever you put a good person, change happens. And wherever it's an average person, sort of something happens, and wherever it's a person who is incompetent or not interested, change just doesn't happen. And so what we're trying to do in our work is say, how do we build a movement of people who are committed to changing education at every level of the system, so that there are enough people looking at cleaning bathrooms in school and enough people looking at education policy and how do you get Section 25 of the right to education to actually work, and enough people directly in front of kids teaching them. Until we have enough people at every level of the system working together and individually committed to being excellent and not mediocre. It always haunts me that there are 4 million nonprofits in this country, and yet if we look at any significant social issue, we've just made so little progress in actually shifting the needle. And why is that? What's behind that? And so I think if there's one area to really invest in, it's investing in people and investing enough, we shouldn't be hearing a child say a few words in English and thinking, oh, wow. We would never say that about our own children, right? We would never say that. So until we keep the bar as high for every single child in the city and say we need to invest not a little bit, but a lot, and we need to keep doing it, and we need our best people to be devoting their lives to this, I don't think it's actually going to shift. But if we do that, and we do it for long enough, I think it is going to shift and change.
So just to tell you a little bit about CREATE, we educate and empower children from marginalized communities as well as children who are disabled, and we give them different kinds of skills, so leadership skills, personality development, communication skills. We have 3 different programs that we run, and we try to make all this happen simultaneously. So we have our CREATE Soft Skills program, where we work with kids. We work with 10 different NGOs, children from 10 different NGOs. We also have our CREATE Trophy, where we, that's for artistic excellence amongst the children. So it's very important for them to feel that they are being, honored. They're given a platform on a professional stage to be able to come up there, create their own ideas, create their own concepts, and perform through the creative arts. So whether it's to do with drama, mime. The last Sunday we did something, and the topic was knowledge is power. So how did they interpret that in their own way? And it was fascinating because one of the schools came up and did their interpretation through yoga. So it was very interesting and very diverse. That's the second thing that CREATE does. And the third, of course, which is most important, and I think this is what's really key, is that we work on a lot of integration programs. So we integrate mainstream children along with children from marginalized communities. And that, I feel, is key. It works in so many different ways. They're given the same kind of education, same kind of training. We get them together and we get them to perform on the professional stage, which is really, really empowering for them. They're out there doing their thing to an audience of 1,000 people. You can understand the kind of excitement and the confidence that they get whilst doing that. The integration part is very, very important, I feel, and I think that's where it all kicks in. The audience, of course, gets to see that this is also possible and then works towards similar ideas. I feel that's what they've shared with me. And apart from that, of course, the children that work with the other children. So whether it's mainstream, it's children from different NGOs, it's very, very important for them because they learn so much from each other. And there are so many great NGOs doing fantastic work, incredible work. But unfortunately, they don't get to work with each other or with other NGOs or with mainstream. So this, I feel, is really, really important. And when the children are exposed to this kind of learning, I think civil society people, some of our parents who've been with us forever are in the audience today, and maybe later on they could also share. But it's so important because that really empowers children on both sides. It's crucial. So these are the three areas that we've been working in. Of course, there's so much more to do, and there's a huge way to go. I feel that if this is expanded in a way that each child in mainstream is given the opportunity to work with children from different backgrounds, different abilities, I think it's going to really, it's kind of going to bridge the gap. And talking about what you were saying, that definitely then they are encouraged to go out there and be the best that they can be. Yeah.
So I wanted to also chat a bit about the work that we do with adolescent girls. We have a collaborative that has pooled funding to actually support a couple of outcomes. And the statistics on actually 1 girl out of 100 ends up completing secondary education. So it's quite stark, and this is a rural statistic. Our urban one is a bit better than the rural statistic. So it's a real issue to keep girls in school, and we've seen that that is one of the outcomes that we must work towards, which is keeping girls in school. The second one that really affects girls is early child marriage. And some of this comes from maturity, getting older, fear of getting pregnant. So delaying first pregnancy and delaying child marriage are 2 extremely important outcomes. If there's anything I'd like to leave you with, it is these 4 things that if we focused on in whatever work you do with girls can really move the needle, which is delaying child marriage, delaying first pregnancy, keeping girls in secondary school, and the last one being increasing agency, so self-esteem, self-efficacy, and choice. But all of this being said, as much as you invest in the girl, we've seen one of the biggest challenges actually being boys and men. We were talking about this earlier. And gatekeepers for these girls that can help them sort of with access and choice. And so you're seeing many more NGOs have a lot more innovative work that is cross-sectoral. So we have to stop thinking on the philanthropy side that I fund education, I fund health, I fund life skills. You have to enable organizations to deliver in a comprehensive way when they're working in these communities, because these communities need more than these very strict pathways. So just broadening that perspective is extremely important. The other issue is a mindset. Our challenge, and it cuts across status and economics, women don't want to work. They want to work, or their families don't want to work. There's this inverse relationship between higher education and women, irrespective of status, and working. Because families of working women are looked down upon. Your women shouldn't be working. My family has a certain status, and they shouldn't be working. So we have a big push to do mindset change. Something like 70% of graduates from IIM Ahmedabad women actually don't work. So there's a lot of things we need to do that cuts across. It's not just the poor and underprivileged that are challenged with some of this, this mindset change. I wanted to just end on, and I know you asked me about corporate philanthropy. I was just wondering how many of you are really interested in corporate philanthropy and that sort of transition, yeah. So I wanted to talk a bit about progress, and I think it's important for the city of Mumbai. I agree with Shaheen to some extent that it's bad and we need to do a lot more, but I think we've come quite a long way in terms of progress when you look at some very specific development indicators. And I think our challenge in the city is that there's this interesting book, I'm sure you guys have all heard about it, called Factfulness by Hans Rosling, and I encourage you to read it. It talks about how we've made progress, and if you read this book, I started to think about, I think Mumbai, and he talks about incomes of poverty at level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 being the highest. Probably all of us are level 4 here. So when you think about the city of Bombay and when you think about poverty and what is it that we need to lift lives and opportunity and access, you're starting to actually have to design for and support almost a growing middle class. And how are we going to have access to really move, whether it's our economy, whether it's our infrastructure, in a city like ours, when you're moving kind of beyond the basic needs. And so you're going to start to need to look at nonprofits, social enterprises, the role of companies, the role of leadership. And so I think it is important, and I think it's a real opportunity for us as a city to think about our philanthropy and how we transform across these income levels.
Thanks a lot. So I don't think any of you want to hear about EZB. So what I'll tell you is, we'll go back to, I think we should talk a little bit about CSR and social entrepreneurship and those factors. But there were a couple of things I wanted to say, given that what all of you have said, and I do want to also follow up across the board on how much you feel technology can help, because after the statistic you gave, I have to say the schools in UP and Bihar, we are finding 35 out of, so it's instead of 1, we seem to be doing pretty well, but we would like to take that to 80 out of 100, so that's the goal. But my direct experience that I've had, most of my pro bono work is in the field of microfinance, and that tells you two things. It's all over the world, not only in India. It is entirely focused at women. And the only reason, there were countries that tried doing loans to people below the poverty line, really poor women. Most of these loans are average size 15,000 rupees. And everywhere in the world, the people who tried to do it with both men and women found that the women not only used it for much more productive purposes, but bottom line were much more honest. And just to give you one stat, which will be a surprise to all of you, you know that in spite of all the good macro features of India, the one issue we have, it's a RBI figure, so it's totally formal, is that 10% of corporate India's loans are not performing, where the borrower cannot pay back. So I have to tell you that in this not-for-profit in Bihar and Eastern UP, and frankly, it's a figure, if you looked across India, the figure would be much the same. The figure of not performing borrowers, poor women who do not pay back, is 0.03. So one is 10 and the other is 0.03. So, and we are talking, I think the whole of India, microfinance, it's one thing, where access has been a great success. You were saying we have miles to go. I think at least, I know it's just one tip of the iceberg, but for credit and savings, we've now crossed a very large figure. So if you're talking 80,000 crores, and it's still, 0.05, those kind of numbers. So intrinsically, what you found is that if you give the woman in the house an opportunity, she finds very, very good uses for the money. And coming back to, the point you were making about now the RBI says that you should give most of this money for a performing loan. So whether it's livestock, whether it's weaving, depending on what, again, you don't need to tell the woman what she should do. She knows exactly the best way to use that money. But the fact of life is there are illnesses. One bad illness wipes out 2 years of a poor family's savings. There is early marriage. So what we've started doing is that the whole nudge theory, which today in behavioral economics is very popular, that we will give a loan for marriage if the girl is not married till the age of 21. So you're kind of nudging good behavior and helping along with the, so I mean that's the, little bit of anecdotal story that I thought I should share with all of you. But coming back to, technology across all platforms, how much do you think when you say you're absolutely right, it should be the same benchmark, the same level of education we would like any of our kids to have, every single kid should have. I mean, I know that's the whole goal of Teach for India, and that's why if you go into the government schools, you want to bring in the teachers so that they improve their quality. So do you think that we've reached a stage, or very soon we will reach a stage where you can, through technology, seriously improve the quality? I can tell you that once again, using biometric, we have got much higher attendance level of teachers, because now it's very easy. You can use, through Google, so he can't even fudge it. Google tells you he's in the classroom and biometric tells him it's him. So he can't send his brother-in-law and each. So, with technology today, you can make a lot of progress. But really in terms of qualitative progress, what do you think? And the same for, arts and culture. Is there stuff we can do using technology? And of course there's crowdfunding and all that stuff. So,
I mean, mine is a slightly, I think, unpopular opinion even to myself, which is that I just haven't seen that silver bullets in education really work. Technology, I think, is a huge enabler, but it's not a substitute. And I think the question is like, where does technology help and where doesn't it? And I think that goes back to like, what is the purpose of education and what are you trying to deliver? When we think about education, while academics is one big piece of it, we think equally, if not more importantly, is the values, the mindset, the exposure, the access, the agency, all of these aspects that you give a child, which I just don't think today we have solutions in technology for. So where we have seen technology play a massive role is in our ability to differentiate for different types of learners on content. So there's a huge amount of content out there. I think especially in secondary school and especially with teacher education, it can play a huge role. But when you think about like so many millions of our children in primary schools who need to grow up as holistic human beings, I feel in some ways technology moves us a little bit further away from that purpose of education.
So I was just having a discussion with the BMC the other day, and we were trying to work on a program which worked with the creative arts and used drama and worked on gender sensitivity workshops. So we're trying to see, I think they have 400 schools here in Bombay, and they're all linked digitally. So we're trying to develop something with them. So I think that falls a little bit into what you were talking about. Apart from that, I just wanted to say, I just remember that we are working with a lot of groups of girl children. They are 15 and 16-year-olds. We're working with their communication skills and also grooming skills, etc., so that they're able to go out there, go out for interviews, their interviewing skills, so that they're able to get better jobs and to make them more employable in that sense. I think, so this is our program for this year. I think we'll do an impact assessment after that, and hopefully next time we meet, we'll let you know how that went. But these are the kind of areas that CREATE is working on, and it's very, hands-on. That's what I wanted to share.
So I think there's no doubt that technology, and I agree with Shaheen, it is not a silver bullet. It is an enabler. And I think that the more we actually invest. And when I think about technology, it's not just about information systems, right? So there's an information systems part of technology, which we've actually seen has helped in education in terms of content and competencies, if you think about Khan Academy and how that's taken off. If you actually look at maternal health, we supported an organization called Arman, which uses phones to be able to work with pregnant mothers, both before pregnancy, after pregnancy, to deliver health messages. So there's quite a lot that can happen on a handheld device, and you're seeing a lot more innovation on the aspect of mobile. And I think it is important, and there's a role for philanthropy to play in that kind of innovation. Because if we use technology as an enabler, we will have step change. See, our problems are so big, whether it's in Mumbai or in India. The actual numbers we have to get to, the level of scale, touches no other country, which is why often in India we are so insular. So whenever you go to conferences, the Indians kind of barely even share or forget about going. So when the Africa story happens or the African models are shared, we're like, we have 22 million people in the city of Mumbai, right? Like what's happening in Nigeria is not a relevant model for us. It is relevant, but this is the kind of mindset. And so the level of scale we need, we absolutely have to invest in technology. And I think that should be all across, from engaging technology companies to philanthropists thinking about where technology, we're willing to take that kind of risk. I do think it's important, and we haven't put enough of our minds to that, because there's the information side and then there's the innovation side, where you can have products that allow for some of that step change. You were asking about corporate philanthropy, right? Was that the question that you asked me that I was actually supposed to answer? Okay.
I'm going to move. So, okay, so I think so we'll move into CSR, and again, just my 2 bits on it is that was one of the reasons that our corporate law took so long to, the old one was 1956, and then we took literally 20 years to amend. And one of the most hotly debated was that there's no country in the world, to my knowledge, that mandates corporate giving. And I feel from my experience with it that I think it's done a lot of good. I mean, it's not ideal, but I think it's taken us absolutely in the right direction. So CSR and impact assessments and all that now has become, there are some people who feel that this has become too much paperwork and less from the heart. But your views, all three of you, on was CSR a good thing? And of course, what should we do to make it much better? And I'll try once again, arts, culture, architecture, that part I think people don't want to really get into.
I just feel incredibly grateful for CSR. I mean, when I started my work, I was paid a salary of 5,000 rupees a month, and this year I had to raise a 70 crore budget, and it's just unbelievable to think about that journey and the amount of money that it takes to do this work well and at scale. And I just don't think we would have been able to do it without CSR. And as you said, I think there are areas of improvement, but what it's done is it's started a dialogue, it's given us an opening, it's allowed us to go in and actually engage with companies. I think where the real work is to shift our mindsets around giving. I think one of the things for all of us in the sector that you realize as you come into the sector to give, and somewhere very soon along the way you realize that it really wasn't about you giving, but you receiving just so much more. And I think if we can spread that understanding, then whether the CSR law comes, goes, I think will increase individual giving in the country significantly beyond just looking after, which I think is amazing in India, our families and our religious institutions, to actually giving where the need is the highest. And I think there's a lot of room for that. And yet there's so much hope. I mean, this week I got a call from one of my ex-students at Akanksha, she texted me on WhatsApp. In fact, just WhatsApp has become such an incredible platform for spreading education. But she WhatsApped me and said, I have a big idea to discuss with you. And she called me and she said, Didi, I don't know if you know, but I work with a really big event management company now. And two of my clients are Jaguar and Land Rover. And I found out that they have CSR budgets. And so I pitched Teach for India to them, and they're really interested. So you have to come in to a meeting next week to meet my boss. And so I think like getting people to believe that they can give no matter who they are, how much they have, because it's good for them. Even more than it's good for the person that you give to. Like, I think that's the real challenge ahead of us as a nation, because as citizens, we need to feel that. But I think the fact that CSR has helped corporates to feel that is really special.
So your point was about
whether CSR has helped
the arts.
yeah.
The arts.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no, and obviously, as you said, you know, from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it's really, it has come a long way. We have been funded by CSR, so it's really helped us a lot. I think also when people see the results in front of them, they're obviously encouraged to give that much more. And as Shaheen was talking to me about something over there, which I think you've forgotten, and you know, you said you're going to talk about is giving of time, which was so important. You want to?
No, I was just saying that, like, thinking broadly about giving beyond money, it just some of the biggest things that have helped accelerate our work is just people giving time. And like, we never thought, Teach for India is 10 years old this year, and 10 years ago we never thought we'd be able to go out and get some of the brightest, most competent people in the country to give 2 years of their life to teaching in a government school, right? These were people from the IIMs and IITs and top companies, and to get them full time to change the direction of their life, like, we just didn't think it was possible. And I think last year about 15,000 people applied to the fellowship, and we have 1,100 of them today teaching. That to me is amazing, that people that were at an IIM today in their email footer write like proud teacher of so-and-so municipal school, Chennai, you know? And I think when people start giving a day a week, a month, a few years of their life or their whole careers for this, that's really when things are going to shift.
Also, I think it's very important, individual giving, as you mentioned right now, it's really, really, I think we find that really works the best for us. When people are motivated to give up their time and, of course, money in whatever form it may be, however small. Right now we had an accelerator program for funding for Create, and of course it was an online program, so we reached out to a lot of people to give to Create. And of course, you had to do it in an individual capacity. You weren't giving it from your company. And that really was an eye-opener because it was so interesting. And what we managed to do was to get people from our work environment, no matter what it was, whether they were the peons or whether they were, you know, middle management or whoever it was, they all gave. And I think that got us, you know, all on the same page, got us on the same family of giving. I think that has to be encouraged in this country. It's all there and it's possible. So I really urge everyone in this room, if you're not giving, to please do so.
So I'm definitely on the same side of really seeing that CSR has increased the pie. So the pie of the amount that is given to the sector has increased, and there's questions around its effectiveness and how long it is and all of that, but there shouldn't be a doubt that it has made the pie a lot larger. Now, is CSR going to solve the issues that we have? I don't think so. I do think, however, it will catalyze the role of corporates and leadership and CEOs and businesses into this experiment of how they're responsible for moving on development outcomes. And I think it's not just about the government, it's not just about nonprofits or the corporates, but I think the future of what philanthropy needs to do is to facilitate how, and that's where we've tried to place Dasra, is how do you facilitate all of this to be able to work together to kind of achieve the outcomes and solve some of these problems. And I think that's the unique part about, the city of Mumbai is, and I see that as the topic because I wanted us to urge ourselves to begin a framework for the city. And it's great if we're all giving and we're participating in our individual capacities. But the real step change is going to be at the aggregate level, what is it working towards achieving? And therefore, who builds this framework is going to be the citizens of this city. And I think as we begin to have that vision and aspiration of what kind of city do we want to be, I think that's when stakeholders can begin to engage, can begin to align, and you can also be a lot more focused in how you give.
Thank you. So before we open up and to questions, I think the last one is social enterprise. If we just quickly get views from everyone on how useful is that a hybrid which is neither here nor there, or given the scale, as you have repeatedly said, of the problems in India, we need all kinds of solutions, and therefore social enterprise is a good one. And just to be clear, I mean, in my mind maybe it means different things for each of us, but the Professor Yunus concept is that no profit, so you feed back all the profits to spend more money on the problem, and what you are doing should make a difference, should make a change. So not a pure commercial activity. So what do you think about social enterprise?
So I come from the framework that you have to first understand and business isn't a great word, but what's the model? So if the business model and the services can be paid for and there's a margin and you have a profit, you are a for-profit, right? And if you're able to measure impact, then there's certain kinds of capital that can support that. A non-profit inherently has this structure because those who you're providing the products and services for cannot afford to pay for it, so it needs to be subsidized. So there are certain models that need to be subsidized, and there's certain models that generate profit, and therefore they can be supported with either commercial capital, with some sort of debt and equity. So I don't think we spend enough time understanding the actual dynamics of the model. Is there a role for social enterprise? Absolutely. But I think there exists a point in time where there's a trade-off between a financial return and an impact. And it's the kind of leadership which will make the choice for social impact over the financial return, which is where I see the role of social enterprise. But I think innovation across the spectrum is actually needed, and we need a lot more capital actually to facilitate the growth in social enterprise. And that's our challenge in India. You have philanthropy, which will move into the nonprofits, and you have the VC private equity folks who will move into the for-profit. But there's this middle for which a mix of capital is really important and can really help these models. And therefore the hybrid, yes, it is a very interesting way for us to work. The regulations in India actually make it quite difficult, but we've supported organizations like Under the Mango Tree, which has the distribution side in its for-profit and the selling, but it has working with farmers and bee boxes in the non-profit. So there are certain aspects of the model. So for example, husk power is another one we've supported, which burns rice husk to generate electricity. Now the plant itself can be a for-profit, but the training of the plant managers would kill into the margins. So when you're building last mile market, it kills the margins in the business. That's separating it and investing in building that market often, and building the capability and awareness happens in the nonprofit, and on the for-profit, you're really doing the generating side of the revenue.
You must have a view, because I mean, you know, especially in your space, India's view is profit is a bad word.
Yeah, my view is it's so hard to raise money, and I work for education and children, which everybody understands, so it's relatively easier. But I'm looking at my dear friend Abodh sitting in the audience, who just has done the most incredible work for stray dogs. And it's really hard to raise money. And so I actually think, while I agree a lot with what Neera said, that some models, like I keep waking up saying, like, how could I make Teach for India a social enterprise? And some models don't lend themselves to that, unfortunately. But I wonder how we can think more. I mean, certainly not adopt the view that making money is bad, because if we can do that and make these enterprises sustainable and be able to hire the best talent, like that's another piece that kills me, when I'm just like not able to hire the person I want because they're going to work and manufacture soaps or do something else, and the only dividing line is my ability to hire them. So I certainly think we need more social enterprises, and we need to be really creative around how we can make our organization sustainable. Because the thought of like year after year spending 8 months of the year raising like next year's budget just becomes really hard as you want to scale. I think Teach for India is in an unusual position today, where for many years, like, we were lucky in being able to raise money and we weren't able to do enough work. And now we're at a place where we're ready to do work and we have this large team ready to go, and the money holds you back. So I think you run into a lot of problems with the pure donation model.
I think that's the key mantra, is that if you have to scale, especially our scales, then you have to be sustainable. That philanthropy can only take you so far. So then should we open up to any questions? Is there a mic? There's no mic. Oh, there's no mic, so you have to just... One question is to Shaheen as well as to Mr. Vakil. But we can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
To Shaheen, because I've seen her taking children to St. Xavier College, and that's how she started. 20 years back? 20 years?
27 years.
27. It's 30 years. Give her a break. In fact, she has led that force. Today, she is a role model, nothing. But what she admitted also, is that it's impossible for NGO to raise money. Especially last 4.5 years, it is something very, very difficult. FCRA issues are changed, and people are gone into the need. Some of them even shut rural NGOs have shut the NGOs. So in this situation, is there any hope in the next few years or next year? The elections are in the corner. That's why. To Bahram is because you are on the board of so many government of India. You are on the NCLT, you are on the SEBI. You don't spare anybody. You speak the truth, whether it is even the best of the corporate. You have said that you need to. Now, Canadian Consulate has demonstrated today. The little girl was made a counsel. Can you tell your corporate that let such kind of girls walk into the boardroom? Is that possible? That is where this CSR money will flow. Otherwise, they will not. Because today, corporates have become smarter. They have their own NGOs. As to there. So, is there any ray of hope for NGOs? I work for 13 NGOs, that's all my experience. And some of them are led by women.
Thank you for your very kind words. Shaheen deserves them. I don't think I do, but thank you so much. No, I think the Canadian example was really fantastic. What I can say is that now the law mandates that there should be X number of women on the board. Again, I think India was... No, but today if you don't, then you will be hauled up and you will be paying, daily fines, etc. So most boards that care about their image, they will have a woman director. I think that there is no question, you don't have a choice, it's mandatory. And I think there's definitely ray of hope, but they will be the real experts on that given CSR, given the fact that we believe there is a mindset change, it's never as far and as quick as we would like because our problems are so huge. But I think so. I mean, all of you should please say. And I realize also that, again, it's so city focused. So while the needs of the rural in many ways is even greater, so for rural NGOs, I mean, unfortunately, FCRA, etc., what has happened is, Shaheen mentioned the number of NGOs we have, and what the government feels is that the vast majority of them, what they say is that, Bahram, you've seen the movie Good, Bad and Ugly. Most of these people are bad and ugly. They are all doing hera fairy. So therefore, all of us get painted with that brush. That's a very unfortunate situation, but that is the mindset today. Yeah, it is. No question.
I mean, I think one of the things you, sir, probably know this being associated with so many NGOs, but you learn that more than anything else in this work, you have to cultivate faith and belief in people. And it actually isn't that difficult, because I think what they don't tell you about working in the nonprofit sector is you see the best in people, because there are people everywhere who want to help. And one of my favorite moments was a little girl asked me for money on the road near Chopati. And I don't generally give kids money, so I said no. And then she was so smart, she pointed to a coconut stand and she said, then come and buy me a coconut. She spent about 6 minutes choosing the biggest coconut on that thing. And so both of us bought coconuts, and we were sort of sitting down drinking these coconuts. And I noticed on the other side of the road a middle-aged man, well-dressed in a suit, sort of looking at us very oddly. And I was feeling a little uncomfortable for a few minutes. And then he came over to us and pulled out of his pocket an apple and gave it to the child and walked away. And to me, that was such a beautiful moment, because I think probably there were so many little moments where he wanted to do something, but there was a little bit maybe of fear or awkwardness. But it just took like one person that he saw to actually do that ripple. And I think that story is just played over and over with 100,000 examples on my journey. I believe people are good, you know, and so whether or not like the CSR law comes or goes, my belief is that the world is in total getting better, and people are getting more aware, and people really care. And they will stand up, and the world will get better.
And you have a very good gentleman right next to you, and he'll help you in your rural mission.
Something like the 501c3 in India. See, I was trained in fundraising for the arts because I was doing media administration, and the one thing that helps to get money, and like Shaheen said, to get the talented, you have to pay for it. They're already good-hearted, they already know what to do. Why should they suffer financially as well, just working for a problem we've all created? So one thing that does help is the 501c3 that you have in the West. And the other thing is a company vetting a new NGO. Someone in Odisha has a flood, and yeah, I want to send 5,000. Then I'm not sure, do they really have a flood? Are they running a liquor den or what? So that helps a lot.
I think you'll have an answer to the second one, right? There are now a lot of NGOs who will make sure that your money is being put to...
Right. Well-trained in management, who I can trust to whatever degree, and who will say yes, they are doing what they should.
So I'm not sure Citibank knows which NGOs to actually fund. Citibank often comes to a GuideStar, a Give India, or a Dasra. So there are now organizations in the sector who look at other NGOs and make those recommendations. So there are quite a few that do that. There isn't a lack of strong NGOs actually to be able to fund. The equivalent of the 501c3, I believe, is a Section 8. So there are nonprofit companies. There are also trusts and societies. The only difference is you get 100% tax deduction in a 501c3. You don't get 100% in India. You only get 50%. I'm not sure the tax deduction is actually a very strong motivation for giving in India. It is a little bit more in the US than we find actually here.
So if I don't want it this year, I can take it next year.
There's just adding to that, So our experience has been that this 80G, which gives you 50%, is really helpful. Like a lot of companies would not fund us without that. So that's a big thing. It's a little hard for a nonprofit to get. There is also a section, 100 AC, right? It's called, which is 100% tax exemption, but it's given for research.
But that's
yeah. So that's a little bit different, yeah.
No, I think, to be very honest, there is. So you had slabs. The most common one is the 50%. And I have to say those that had the 100%, they are being revoked. So I think we are going the other way. But there is some tax benefit. So the bottom line is it's not as attractive as the US, but there is tax benefit. So the bottom line is, as Shaheen says, you have to give both with your heart and your pocket. Please.
So the people who are, the contributions you are getting, are there repeat contributions which are coming to you, or it is every year something new which is coming? And one problem becomes like, one NGO starts and then it becomes big, it becomes prominent, and then people start thinking, oh, it has become big, they are already having money, so why should we be giving to them? We should look for somebody else. So is there some way, like you can see the fact sheet, how much you need, what are the programs, and what is still needed money?
Yeah.
For new revenue.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you said that. So for those of you that didn't hear, she asked about like the difficulty in raising money, and also that when you become larger, people tend to think that you're too rich as an NGO and they don't want to give to you, which is very ironic because in the business sector, when someone is larger and successful and able to do more, you'll invest more. But in the nonprofit sector, you get penalized for it. Just to clear this up for our organizations, it is really a struggle. So we raise money about 10 months in advance, which really doesn't put us in a very good position when we hire people, etc. A lot of our donors are repeat donors, so there's a lot of reporting requirements increasingly now that companies have when they fund us and foundations have, and each of them tends to have a different reporting formats. In fact, my team today came to complain that we have 80 different donors, all who want different quarterly reports. So that becomes challenging and difficult and costs money as well. But I think it's a combination of constantly looking for new people to build your pool and cultivating old people and showing them the impact of what you're doing. And I find what really helps is just bringing people in to see what you're doing. Because often on paper, a lot of nonprofits look like they're doing the same work, but each has its own unique aspect. And when you come in and you immerse yourself and you see the work, you can sort of connect with whether this is something you want to give to or not.
Just add one thing. So I think what we're seeing a need for actually is larger NGOs in a 100 crore budget range. So we need to actually work to scale NGOs up to that level, because when you have larger players at this level, you're really achieving scale and the impact and how these organizations are run and how they get talent and all of that stuff will really start to multiply if we actually have larger NGOs. So to your question, the smaller ones are dying. It's okay, in my mind, because we have too much of a fragmented sector where everyone's doing their own little small thing. There will be a movement now towards aggregation and a movement towards having stronger, larger NGOs. And I think there will be a growing need for retail philanthropy. So the more the NGOs can do to actually aggregate your individual money, because your individual money actually has the most flexibility. We can actually use that funding to cover overhead costs and for salaries. So if the sector innovates on aggregating retail, as in your individual small amounts, that gives a lot more flexibility to an organization to be able to actually have more visibility, to be able to spend it how they want. So doing both of these, I think, will really be helpful.
One last question.
I share positivity of Shaheen, and I quite agree with my sister there when she said that you have to bring up the smaller one to the level of 100 crore. difficulty in bringing the smaller ones up is the general perception in individual donors. The general perception is that administrative expenses are too high. And I wish the larger NGOs or other people who might be spending from their own pocket, but their style of living and standard gives a wrong impression that money is not being properly used. And I quite agree that individual donors don't care about tax benefits. So I think the image, perception is very important.
Yeah, please. The topic is philanthropy and the city and I'd like to learn about the work of Mumbai. Have you seen in your individual work the giving patterns different between Mumbai or Delhi? And have you looked at tier 2 cities? Because everyone presumes that the money is also in the big cities, but tier 2 cities do have a lot of spending power, especially in the luxury sector. So have you noticed these different patterns of giving?
I mean, I can just quickly share from our own experience, like we get the maximum amount of funding from Mumbai. So we're in 7 different cities and we really struggle to raise money in the tier 2 cities. It's also because we haven't yet evolved a more retail individual strategy. But we found, firstly, a lot of the corporate decisions get taken out of Mumbai. So even if you're going to them in other places, no, we found it much easier to raise funds in Mumbai than Delhi. But I don't know, that's one I think Neera would be better placed to answer.
Yeah, no, I think that even for us, we've seen a lot more success in raising funds in Mumbai, probably then Bangalore, and then kind of Delhi. So the metros are a lot easier. I think individuals make many more individual decisions into their giving, or it's how it's related to where they work. What we've noticed in tier 2 is it's certain communities. So certain communities or industries, so like Marwaris in Jaipur, the gem business people, you know, they may pool money, but they want to give immediately in their vicinity. So local philanthropy in tier 2 cities we see happening a lot more of. I think it's the metros where you're having a bit more enlightened giving, if we can just call it that, where they're actually willing to give to different kinds of nonprofits.
I think the other thing in Mumbai that we've found is like people are so willing to give of their services, and that just like helps you so much, right? So Bahram does all of my legal work, right? And I write to, and that's stuff that we would never be able to get that kind of advice, or Godrej gives us our office. And so we're able to avail of like the best of the city, and people are very open to giving in kind.
We really operate only in Bombay, and all our funding is done from here. So, yeah.
But I think in terms of giving, we're second to Bangalore. In terms of philanthropy, Bangalore and the IT folks pool in, and Wipro kills it, as in Premji, in terms of why that's a lot bigger. But we're actually quite a giving city.
Like Mumbai has a floating population. So do we have a strategy for kids of, say, construction workers or truck drivers? Do we have an education strategy in place for the migrant workers' children? And is there political will to try and ensure continuity of education for these kids?
I mean, I used to follow Mobile Creche quite actively. I was realizing as you spoke that I haven't been in touch with them for a while, but they were set up to do exactly this, and actually set up and care for people on construction sites, and they worked with contractors to do that. We just work with whichever kids are landing up in the government schools and in the low-income private schools. So some of them are migrant children who travel, and some of them are residents. The short answer to all of these things is we're not doing anywhere near enough. And even with Teach for India and Akanksha, while we work with very low-income children from slum communities, we're still not dealing with even more vulnerable kids who are out of the school system, on the streets. I think there's a massive need for work at that level as well.
Thank you to our panel for an absorbing discussion. Thank you for our partners to make this happen. NGMA Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, Mr. Kenneth and Shruti, who were here earlier. The Consulate General of Mumbai, Canada in Mumbai, Tara, Ethia and Maithili, thank you. again, we've been getting all the pictures of the buildings turned pink. They look quite wonderful. I suggest you go check them out. Thank you, audience, for being here, because it wouldn't be worth it if we didn't have people who are interested and engaged in what we do. The next program in this series, Multipolis Mumbai, is on mapping towns within the city. It's an interesting one. It's on November 15th in this very place. And we have lots of very interesting programs coming up at Avid. We have an art of illustrating workshop towards the end of the month. More information is at the desk outside. And thank you very much, and have a good evening.